They're just kids, they'll adapt. My father-in-law's voice boomed through our living room as he dropped his son Marcus's gym bags on my children's beds. I stood in the doorway, my hands trembling as I watched him methodically dismantle the room my 8-year-old twins had called their sanctuary since they were born. My name is Olivia Parker, and at 34, I never imagined I'd be watching my father-in-law, Richard Thompson, systematically destroy my children's sense of security while my husband David stood by, nodding in agreement. "Dad's right, honey," David said, placing a hand on my shoulder that felt more restraining than comforting. "The boys are young. They can sleep on the pull-out couch for a few months while Marcus trains for the state championships. This room has the best lighting and space for his equipment." I shrugged off David's hand, my eyes fixed on the soccer trophies and family photos being carelessly tossed into a cardboard box. And where exactly are Tommy and Jack supposed to do their homework? Where will they keep their clothes? Their toys? Richard barely glanced up from his task. The garage has plenty of storage space, and kids these days spend too much time indoors anyway. This will be good for them. The garage. The uninsulated, spider-infested garage where we kept our lawn equipment and old Christmas decorations. That's where my father-in-law thought my children belonged. I watched as Marcus, my 19-year-old brother-in-law, strutted into the room, his college letterman jacket a bold reminder of why this was happening. The star athlete, the pride of the Thompson family, needed a proper setup for his training equipment while he prepared for the upcoming track championships. "This is perfect," Marcus exclaimed, already measuring spaces for his weight bench and treadmill. "The boys won't mind, right, Olivia? They love their Uncle Marcus." Love might be stretching it. The twins had met Marcus exactly 3 times in their lives, during brief holiday visits when he barely acknowledged their existence. But now suddenly he needed to move in with us because the dorm environment isn't conducive to proper athletic training, according to Richard. I watched helplessly as my children's artwork was stripped from the walls, their carefully arranged bookshelf dismantled, their entire world packed away to make room for someone else's dreams. The twins were at school, blissfully unaware that they'd come home to find their room transformed into a personal gym for an uncle they barely knew. "The pull-out couch is actually pretty comfortable," David offered weakly, perhaps sensing my growing anger. "And it's just temporary, until Marcus qualifies for the championships. 3 months, tops." 3 months, 90 nights of my children sleeping in the living room, doing homework on their laps, living out of boxes because their father couldn't stand up to his dad. Because in the Thompson family, athletics always came first, and Richard's golden boy couldn't possibly be expected to train in a regular gym like everyone else. Did anyone even think to ask the twins how they feel about this? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. Richard finally turned to face me, his expression a mixture of condescension and impatience. "They're 8, Olivia. At that age, I had David sharing a room with Marcus in a house half this size. Your boys are lucky to have a comfortable couch and a nice living room. Some children don't even have that." The comparison made my blood boil. David had spent years in therapy working through the resentment of always having to sacrifice for his younger brother's athletic pursuits. Now here he was, perpetuating the same cycle with his own children. Besides, Marcus chimed in, "I'll make it up to them. Once I win the championship, they can tell everyone their uncle is a state champion. That's way cooler than having their own room." I bit back the retort that threatened to escape. My children didn't need a state champion uncle. They needed their own space, their own beds, their own sense of security. But looking at the 3 Thompson men, their faces set with that familiar stubborn determination, I knew arguing would be pointless. Instead, I turned and walked to the kitchen, my mind already formulating a plan. If they thought I was going to stand by and watch my children be treated like second-class citizens in their own home, they had severely underestimated me. As I heard them continuing to rearrange the room, discussing where to place Marcus's medals and trophies, I pulled out my phone and made 2 calls. The first was to my sister Emma, a real estate lawyer who had helped us buy this house 5 years ago. The second was to my mother, who had never quite warmed to the Thompson family's particular brand of entitlement. By the time I hung up, I had the beginnings of a solution that would make Richard regret ever suggesting my children belonged in a garage. "The boys will understand," David said later that evening as we prepared dinner. "They know family has to stick together." I stirred the pasta sauce with perhaps more force than necessary. "Yes, they do," I replied quietly. They absolutely do. That evening, watching my twins try to hold back tears as they discovered their room transformed into a makeshift gym, broke something inside me. Tommy clutched his favorite stuffed dinosaur, the only toy he'd managed to rescue before everything else was relegated to the garage. Jack just stood there, staring at the weight bench where his bed used to be. "But where are we supposed to sleep?" Jack asked, his small voice trembling. Before I could answer, Marcus bounded into the room, already dressed in his training gear. "Check it out, little dudes. Isn't this awesome? Your room is going to help me become a champion." The twins pressed closer to me, shrinking away from their uncle's forced enthusiasm. David appeared behind Marcus, carrying blankets for the pull-out couch. "Come on, boys, it'll be like camping. You love camping, remember?" "We camp in tents," Tommy whispered. "Not our living room." Richard's booming voice carried from the kitchen, where he was instructing his wife, Linda, on how to prepare Marcus's protein shakes. "The boys sound ungrateful, David. When you were their age, you never complained about sacrificing for family." I watched my husband's face fall slightly at the memory, but he quickly masked it. "Dad's right, kids. Sometimes we have to make sacrifices for the greater good." That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Marcus in my children's room, the twins curled up uncomfortably on the pull-out couch, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open. Emma's email contained everything I needed: property records, mortgage documents, and most importantly, the original agreement David and I had signed when we bought the house. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "The guest rooms are ready whenever you need them, sweetheart. Don't let those Thompsons bully my grandbabies." The next morning brought the first signs that this arrangement was going to be even worse than I'd imagined. Marcus started his training at 5 a.m., the whir of the treadmill and clang of weights jolting my children awake. By 6 a.m., Richard was in the kitchen, loudly preparing Marcus's champion's breakfast, while complaining about the twins' school backpacks cluttering the living room. "They need to learn to keep their things organized," he lectured as Tommy tried to find his homework among the blankets and pillows. "Marcus never leaves his equipment lying around." I bit my tongue, remembering the state of the garage where they'd haphazardly thrown my children's belongings. Linda hovered nearby, occasionally offering weak suggestions about maybe clearing some space in the basement for the boys' things, only to be immediately shut down by Richard. "The basement needs to stay open for Marcus' rainy day training," he insisted. "Can't have anything interfering with his routine." The breaking point came that afternoon. I arrived home from work to find Jack sitting on the front porch, crying quietly. Inside, I could hear Richard berating David. "Your boys need to learn discipline. Marcus can't concentrate with them running around the house making noise. They need to stay outside until he's done training." I found David in the kitchen, looking torn. "Dad has a point, Olivia." The boys were playing tag in the living room. "It's disruptive." They were playing in their home, I said quietly, dangerously. "Where exactly are our children supposed to exist, David? The garage isn't good enough for their belongings. The living room isn't good enough for them to play, and now they can't even be in their own house." "It's temporary," David repeated his new mantra. "Just until the championships." 3 days, I said, my voice steady. "That's how long this has lasted, and our children have already been relegated to second-class citizens in their own home." "Well, I've made some decisions of my own." I pulled out the documents Emma had sent me. "Did you know that when we bought this house, my name was put on the deed first? That legally, I have the right to determine who lives here." David's face paled. "Olivia, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that tomorrow morning, either Marcus and your parents find somewhere else to train, or the twins and I will be staying at my mother's house. And trust me, if we leave, the next paper you'll be seeing won't be property records, it'll be divorce papers." "You can't do this," Richard thundered, having entered the kitchen unnoticed. "This is about family, about supporting Marcus's dreams." I turned to face my father-in-law, years of pent-up frustration finally boiling over. "No, Richard, this is about 2 8-year-old boys who deserve to feel safe and valued in their own home. This is about not repeating the same toxic patterns that made your own son spend years in therapy. This is about being actual family, not just using that word to manipulate people into giving you what you want." The kitchen fell silent. David stared at the property documents, his face a mix of shock and something else. Was it recognition? Richard's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "Sleep on it," I said, gathering my things. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. Either way, my children will not spend another night on that couch. I walked out of the kitchen, heading to the living room where Tommy and Jack were quietly playing with their few remaining toys. Come on, boys, I said, managing a smile. How about we get ice cream for dinner tonight? As we drove to the ice cream parlor, I caught glimpses of my sons in the rearview mirror. They looked tired, confused, but there was also relief in their eyes. Relief that someone was finally standing up for them. My phone buzzed again, Emma confirming she'd filed the necessary paperwork just in case. Everything was in place. Now it was up to David to decide. Would he stand with his children or continue enabling his father's favoritism? Either way, by this time tomorrow, things would change. I just hoped David would make the right choice before it was too late. The next morning, I woke early to find David sitting at the kitchen table, still in yesterday's clothes. His eyes were red, and several cups of coffee littered the surface in front of him. He looked up as I entered. I spent all night thinking about what you said, he began quietly. About therapy, about toxic patterns. I kept remembering how it felt, always having to give up everything for Marcus. Always being told that family meant sacrifice. But somehow I was the only one sacrificing. I poured myself a coffee and sat across from him. From upstairs came the familiar sound of Marcus's early morning workout. I called Uncle Steve last night, David continued. You know, Dad's brother. He told me something interesting. Apparently, he has a fully equipped home gym in his basement. He lives 15 minutes from the training center where Marcus practices. That's convenient, I said carefully, watching my husband's face. He offered to let Marcus stay with him months ago, but Dad insisted on coming here instead. Said it was about family bonding. David's laugh was bitter, more like about control. The sound of small feet padding down the stairs interrupted us. Tommy and Jack appeared, already dressed for school, their faces showing the strain of another uncomfortable night on the couch. David looked at our sons, really looked at them, perhaps for the first time since this nightmare began. I'm so sorry, boys, he said, his voice cracking. I forgot my most important job is being your dad. Before the twins could respond, Richard's heavy footsteps descended the stairs. Marcus needs his protein shake mix exactly right, he announced, then stopped short seeing us all at the table. David stood up. Dad, we need to talk. Marcus isn't staying here anymore. What followed was exactly the explosion I'd expected. Richard raged about family loyalty, about opportunities, about ungrateful children. Linda hovered anxiously in the background while Marcus stood on the stairs, looking surprisingly unsurprised. Actually, Marcus cut through his father's tirade. I'd already called Uncle Steve. He's coming to pick me up in an hour. The silence that followed was deafening. You what? Richard sputtered. His gym is better anyway, Marcus shrugged. And honestly, Dad, making my nephews sleep on a couch wasn't cool. Even I can see that. Within 2 hours, the house was restored to normal. Marcus and his equipment were gone, headed to Uncle Steve's. Richard and Linda left in stunning silence. Richard's parting shot about remembering who really cares about family falling flat in the face of David's quiet resolve. That afternoon, I helped the twins put their room back together. Every poster rehung, every toy rescued from the garage, every book back on its shelf. David worked alongside us, taking special care to position everything exactly as the boys wanted it. Is Uncle Marcus mad at us? Tommy asked as we made his bed with his favorite superhero sheets. No, buddy, David answered, pulling our son into a hug. Sometimes grown-ups forget what's really important. But I promise you, no one is ever taking your room away again. That evening, as the twins slept soundly in their own beds for the first time in days, David and I sat on the back porch. I called my therapist today, he said quietly. Made an appointment for next week. I don't want to carry Dad's legacy forward anymore. I squeezed his hand. You're already breaking the cycle just by choosing our children first. You know Dad won't forgive this easily, he warned. Maybe not, I agreed. But our job isn't to make your father happy. It's to make sure our children never have to doubt their place in this family. David nodded, and we sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge. Sometimes the hardest battles are fought not with dramatic gestures, but with quiet choices to protect those who depend on us. In standing up to Richard, we'd done more than reclaim our room. We'd reclaimed our family's future. And if Richard couldn't accept that, Well, that would be his loss entirely.